Hello, I'd like to welcome you to part 6 of the complete course on SentinelOne Endpoint Detection and Response, or EDR. So we're going to start off today. We're dealing with threats. All right. So for those of you that have followed the series, congratulations. Thank you for hanging in there. This is a lot of material, but today I'm going to be going through the what's called the Incidents tab, which is where we find our threats and alerts. Okay. So let's start to dig into this. I can't show you the alerts because that feature is not enabled, but to explain it, alerts are I can configure certain parameters within the SentinelOne console that will allow me to proactively detect things, and they will generate an alert. Okay, if that makes any sense. Threats are done through the AI detection engine, so let's go ahead and dig into those. So the first thing you notice, I don't have any threats here. I'm in this part of the console. So a couple things I can do is I can take it, I can go to a day. Well, I don't have anything there. Let's go ahead and jump out 3 months. Okay, all right, cool. So now we actually have some threats and detections, but I'm only in one customer tenant, right? So I'm using these as an example. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to go higher, and I can jump into, like, I'll move to this level, right? So move up to the account level, which allows me to basically see all customers. And once again, these are just the mentees here. But if this were more my actual console at work, you'll see many customers like here. And I jump into each of their environments to take action and do things that's needed. So once I go to this level, but at the same time, it shows you that I can see all customers. So anything that happened in any customer environment. And then I can go up to last year and I can see everything. So pretty much since I had the console, these are all the threats that I've had. Now let's dig into this a little bit. Let me kind of go through this tab and show you. Actually, I want to start with one that has multiple detections because it's very important that you see this. So if you notice this one down here, it says it has 4. It's got a little shield and it shows the number 4 beside it. This one shows 2. And what I want to do here is I'm going to expand that, drag that up, because I want to show you the navigation here. So I'm on 4 of 4. It shows the computer name. If I press the previous, there it goes through all of them here. Okay, so I can go through all 4. But a lot of times the mistake that people make, including myself, is you click these arrows and you think these arrows are the same as the previous and next. This arrow goes to the beginning. This arrow goes to the end. So if a lot of times, if you don't pay attention, you'll come in here and you'll click the arrow thinking you're going to the previous one, and you'll go to the beginning and you'll skip it and you'll not take action or take action on the wrong one. Okay. So that being the case, let's go through all the details. So you have the originating process. What started this, the name of the computer, which this is the VM that I was running or still am running on my machine. What initiated it was the agent policy that did that, the file path. We don't have any command line arguments, but I'll show you on one. I think this Epic Game Launcher, you can see I do have a command line argument right here that it was attack silent or minus silent right there. It shows the identity, like this was signed. So basically there's a way that you can kind of like put a signature just like you would in real life on software, so that it shows that it really legitimately came from the company, or in most cases high fidelity, that it actually came from the company. So you want to know if it's signed or not. The classification malware, we're going to dig into that a lot. Once again, you see this one was initiated by Explorer. It was also the originating process. It was initiated by the agent policy. The engine, this is behavior AI. We'll talk a little bit about the different type of engines you have within SentinelOne. And then of course the detection type was dynamic. We have static and dynamic. And then a mitigating action. So for this one, I can do things to it. So if there is a detection, and I left this one because I wanted to be able to use this as an example. So I can kill, quarantine, which means so kill, stop the process. Quarantine, which means it's going to take that file, either move that file to a secure location or do something to make sure that file can't be executed or take any action against anything on its own. You can remediate, which means it deletes all files and system changes completed by the threat. And then you can also roll back, like I talked in the previous video about SentinelOne being able to roll back changes, because it works with volume shadow copy, which basically allows you to capture the state of the computer at a particular time and then roll back to after this virus or malware or ransomware. And I don't like the term virus. I don't really see a lot of viruses anymore. But after this malicious software takes some kind of action against the machine to impact it negatively, we can roll back those changes. And then when we finish, once again, we're in that SOC analyst role. We can mark this as resolved. Always put comments. I highly recommend you get in the habit, document, okay? And then we can add it to the blacklist, which means if it detects this in the future, it's going to take action. But we can assign this to the scope. We can go up to a very account level, which means everybody in my console, every other company on that list I showed you, it will be blacklisted for everybody, or just within this site or within this group in a site. And these groups over here, these are the sites themselves. I'll show you the groups, but once again, I covered that in a previous video. And then your analysis verdict, okay? So you can say, is this a positive? Is it a true positive, or is it suspicious? Okay, so these are all the fields, and you'll see these again in just a second. Now, we can view the threat details. We're gonna go here in just a second. We're gonna spend a pretty decent amount of time here, but we can also jump the virus total and see if this has been detected on virus total, which it hasn't. However, but if I go up here one, this uninstall right here, I'm gonna click that one and look at that one on virus total, and look at there, it lit up like a Christmas tree. And one thing to notice is that right here, we got detection, but we got details. A lot of people go to this first thing on virus total, upload the file and whatever, and they look at this screen. But there's a lot of additional information, that you can use to make an educated decision.
Someone was detected at your front door.
That's my ring system. Okay, doing this thing. Cool. So anyway, that being the case, we can also see the number of detections, behavior, and then community. What does the community say? You can sign up and you can actually leave comments. You can do this too. If you know about a particular piece of malware, you can start leaving comments that others can kind of like make a decision based on some of the feedback that you've given about this malware. All right, so let's close the virus total out. All right, and then let's work our way across. So we talked a little bit about the mitigating actions. Indicators, a lot of times, depending on which piece of malware, we'll look at the Epic Game Launcher, see how it gives you a lot of information about like what happened here. What are the indicators of compromise? Code injection, library unknown, so those type of things. And then we also have notes, and I strongly encourage you document. Go ahead and add notes about what you did. You know, it'll capture the timestamp, but you may be entering this now, but the event took place, 3 hours ago. So put that information there always, because this is your get out of jail free card. You never know when you may need that documentation to save your job, or even worse, right? So now that we've done that, let's take a look here, and we'll go into the threat details. And I want to use this Epic Launcher because it takes you to this screen. You can see you have a lot of information. And so one of the things I want to note, like we've already talked about this. It talks about the publisher. It talks about who signed it. Basically, that electronic signature that helps you to validate this is actually legitimate software. But nothing is 100% in this field, right? Okay, so keep that in mind. And then also over here, we have the different type of engines. You got a copy file. I want to mention this. You have the download thread file and copy file. These are very nice because, for instance, I might be sending an email to an IT person and say, hey, here's what we detected. And I'm not going to send them the whole thing or a link to the console. Sometimes I'll just copy the details, drop that in there, or copy a piece of it. Like you can hover over it and you can type press Control C on your keyboard to copy a specific entry. So they've done some really, really cool things within the console to help you. And then also you see right here, we got the engine initiated. It was the agent policy that started it was the behavior AI engine that detected it. The detection type was dynamic. You have static and dynamic detection. Static refers to a lot of times files that are on the machines. It's classified as malware. We'll show all the classifications later. File size is very helpful because there are certain files on the computer that have a fixed file size. And a lot of times you may see a computer that has a malicious file that's masquerading as another file, and the file is different. That's one way you can kind of get an indication that this might not be legitimate because the file size is actually different, okay? And then of course you have the storyline ID, and I think that's gonna refer to the other screen. Not as sure about that, but I think that refers to like when I get into maybe the timeline, and I'll show that in just a second. And then the threat ID, which means it's unique. And these are things you can use to kind of correlate across the console. So if I can search for this threat ID and see if this is associated with anybody else, but once again, or maybe this is a unique identifier for just this incident, just this detection. So not as sure about that. And I always try to be truthful when it's something that I'm not as clear about. So if you know the answer to that, drop that in the comments, okay? And then down here, you can see the real data about the endpoint. So that's good and helpful. It's online connected. It completed its full disk scan. That was when, once again, I talked about how SentinelOne scans. Okay, reboot action, pending reboot is no, and it's connected to the network. And then I get into some details of the computer, more like just kind of some telemetry, different information about the endpoint itself, things to notice, the agent version. If the agent version gets too far behind, then the software may not optimally perform because it's an older version. It doesn't have some of the new enhanced features. That's why they release new updates, but not like like antivirus back in the day. It had to have a signature file. This is a little bit different. This is artificial detecting. You can see what users logged in, which is myself, the UID of the agent, which is the unique identifier for that agent itself. So every time you install SentinelOne or pretty much any security software, it assigns a unique identifier so that you can verify that agent is that agent on that machine. IP addresses, visible IP addresses, etc., all that good stuff. And then over here, you got the threat indicators, and what it talks about, it associates those with MITRE, which is an attack framework, which is a fancy way of saying that they've documented all the different ways, the different components of different type of attacks. And so you can kind of see defensive evasion, privilege escalation, and you can go and you can actually correlate this with the MITRE attack chain. And I think, Attack IQ, highly recommend they have a whole course on MITRE, and so that you can learn that MITRE attacks and stuff like that, so that you can learn that, add that to your list of skills. But you can see all of those. You can see notes that you've added here, and the XDR feature, not as familiar with that, haven't used that. So if I get access to that, maybe doing a separate video to talk a little bit about that. And then we can transition up here on the actions tab. We can do mitigated actions. I showed that just a couple of seconds. That's where we can kill, quarantine, remediate, and roll back, and then assign those verdicts. But also here, I got the XDR response. Once again, we'll talk about that. We can run scripts. We have the ability to create and upload scripts to SentinelOne that I can then action here and run from this machine, or I can run it against every machine in the console or a subset. Forensic collection, we have a feature there where we can kind of gather files and stuff like that. Scope does not have remote ops. Okay, don't have access to that one. Okay, and then I can add it to the block list, which means that it's going to block it, and I think I showed that earlier. You can block for the entire scope, you can block for the entire account, the site, the group, etc. Exclusion, what if this is determined to be legitimate software? I can exclude that here, and then I can disconnect it from the network, which means it won't talk to anything but the SentinelOne console, but it's really connected to the network. It's just been contained, so I can only perform actions through the console to clear and remediate this machine, or do whatever is necessary to make sure that I defang the threat, right? Or gather information for forensics or whatever. So that disconnect feature is very powerful. The Explorer feature is it's not simple at all. What it does is it shows you, like, basically this process launched this process that copied this file. And so it's a visual representation of essentially what happened with this threat, which I think is freaking awesome that we do have this kind of thing. So the Epic launcher basically launched the Destiny 2 launcher, many of them actually, looks like it. Launched the It launched the Fortnite launcher in addition to that. So you got a lot going on here. And then let's see, I see something in red. So you can see, look at that. You see down there the little red thing? Oh, it's behind my it's behind my camera. Let me move this because I want you to be able to see this. When I hover over this, see that little pop up down there? So it's kind of showing you on the process tree timeline where all this happened. And you can see this all happened. Oh, look at that. That's towards the end. The rest of these were towards the beginning. That's new. I just came across that today. I did not notice that until today. Wow. So that's something. Once again, as I use these tools, I continue to grow my tool bag also. And then you can see right here, we got the process IDs. This is very important because if we're doing forensics or anything like that, or we're trying to, maybe the process is still running, then we've got a list of these processes, to show what happened. Maybe it's a legitimate process, but we can kind of use the process ID to kind of really associate what was happening at what time. Because when you launch a program on a machine, everything that launches gets a process ID. And so this, we may have several of these, but only one of these is the one we're actually looking for that's potentially malicious. So just a lot of information there. And then of course you can zoom in and zoom out over here. This is really nice to be able to have this option right there. Although it looks like, for whatever reason, the console looks like I'm recording, but okay, there, it froze up. So you can see zoom in, zoom out right there. Okay, we can export. And then up here, well, let's go here. And we were able to kind of see there on the visual representation. But if we show the events right here, it's literally giving us a timestamp and exactly what happens. And things to note is that, it tells you if it's a process or a file or indicator. Really good information, an IP address, so we can see the IP connection. This is all stuff that's very important, because you can see, okay, did this make an outbound connection to this or that, and those type of things. So once again, all very important aspects of this. Okay, and then let's see, I think that's all we need for this. Let's go to the timeline, which is next on our list here. And so basically it says right now, the timeline management technology interpreters, we move the agent to the site. So this is kind of giving us some details of some actions that we're taking. So I did move this into the site to be able to do this video. Said we initiated a full disk scan and gave the IP address at the time of it. And so that's what the timeline is. But you can see up here at the top, we can actually go ahead and put our analysis verdict and classify this as a true, false, positive, suspicious, undefined. And then we can say, we can put this as in progress, which we don't. Your flow is when you start working on this, mark it in progress at that time, and then when you complete it, go ahead and resolve it. But a lot of times I can take in the field that you start working on stuff and you don't have these good processes in place, and so it may never get marked as in progress, and another teammate may jump in and start working on it. It's just not good. It's not optimal. It's a waste of resources and time. So not finished yet. Let's get into all the details. So now I've got here, and you notice we've got view more filters here, and I've came and I turned these on already, so you can see all of these additional fields. Okay, and once we turn them on, they actually appear as options over here. So we talked about the threat status: mitigated, marked as benign, or not mitigated, right? Mitigated is a fancy word to say it's fixed, it's resolved, it's contained, you know, like the threat is over. Okay. The AI confidence level: malicious, suspicious, or doesn't know, not applicable. And then the analysis verdict: true, positive, undefined, false, positive, suspicious. So it's giving you all the categories. So essentially, like if you think about test taking, this is information because you can use this basically to build out your knowledge and understanding of exactly all the ways that this function programs and looks at threats and incidents. Resolved, unresolved, or in progress. We talked about that. Pending action. So if I'm trying to quarantine a file or trying to stop a process, and SentinelOne is doing it, but maybe the machine is not responding, maybe the machine is offline, that will show up as a pending action because it's waiting to complete it. And if that action doesn't succeed, you'll get a failed action. Okay, so you can see I've had 2 actions that I've sent. Maybe I was quarantining something that failed. Reboot required. Well, maybe when I install SentinelOne, a lot of times, maybe well, a couple of things. We're in the threat section, and so for this one, and don't hold me if you're from SentinelOne and you know better than me, feel free to leave this in the comments. Okay, and I'll dig into it and we can find out for sure. But what I recall this mean is, say sometimes when you're doing mitigation and you're trying to roll back like a threat or something like that, it may require a reboot to actually complete that action. Okay, that's what I believe this reboot is referring to, because I haven't had to even like filter down for that category, to be honest. And so OS version, we can see Windows, Mac, and Linux. I always say you need to be familiar with all versions. And then OS versions, that's interesting. It shows Windows, different ones. I don't know if that field is just cut off, but I'm assuming maybe these are different versions: Windows 10, Windows 11. I'm not sure about that one. And then the engine. So you got the SentinelOne Cloud, Behavior AI. These are all the detection engines, which we talked about in previous video, referring to the policies. The on-write static AI, the on-write static AI suspicious, reputation-based, cloud detection. And here are all the categories. So if there's some kind of certification testing in the future, you know, this is where you find out all those categories. So because they may ask you, what are some of the three to four categories for this? Well, here you go. You learn these: anti-exploitation, fileless malware, intrusion detection, potentially unwanted applications, PUA, used to be called PUP, potentially unwanted programs, lateral movement, remote shell, manual application control, and threat intelligence. And then our actual classification is malware, ransomware, virus, PU, and adware. There are more classifications than this, I believe. I believe there are 9 total based on our documentation, kind of looking at my work console. It can be initiated by the agent policy, which we created policies, talked about that in the previous video. Full disk scan, local agent command, deep visibility. We talked about that a little bit. I can't show that one because I don't have access to that one. Management APIs, you can initiate the function through an API. And the guys that own this console, the Ariade, I don't know what their name. I can never figure out how to pronounce their name. But anyway, the guys that I buy this from, they probably have lots of API integrations that they can do all kind of things in the console using the API and stuff like that, so they can initiate actions to mitigate threats using the API, which is where you want to be. That's way down the maturity level as far as where you are in cybersecurity, being able to do that. on-demand scan, so we can filter down just for that. And then let's make sure we get over here, okay, and then we can tell if the endpoint is offline or online. That's really important, because if you're looking at all these threats and you're trying to figure out ones you can actually mitigate and take action on, just filter down to online and address those, because you send it to the offline devices, nothing's going to happen. Mitigate it preemptively. You can see if that was done, or if this is the kind of something we're going afterwards, and we're clicking those boxes to kill, quarantine, rollback, and stuff like that. So you can see all of these were preemptively mitigated. Note exists. If we talked about putting notes on it, if we can filter down just to see which one of these have notes assigned and which ones don't, and we can say, hey, why haven't you put a note on this? Why didn't you put some documentation? External ticket. So based on what this is, I've been able to see that this one, when I look at this one, I can filter down to this one, FileZilla. And you notice over here, Vixen, this is not me or any of my mentees or anything part of our team here. And so this is probably taking action via API, so through their ticketing system and stuff like that. That's what I believe that refers to. And then let's go ahead and close this, and we'll scroll back over. And man, throat's dry. Too much, man, talking for what, 20 minutes? And almost finished, so hang in here with me. And then external ticket, we talked about that, in cloud providers. And once again, you always need to start gaining some familiarity with all of these: AWS, Azure, GCP. EXXi, I think that's basically VMware. ESX was their product, and maybe EXI is their cloud environment, but you can always Google it, right? Or you can either Bing AI it, right? Which I highly would recommend too. But make sure that you'd always double check AI. It's not quite flawless at this point, okay? So, with that being said, if you're still here, please hit the subscribe button, okay? This is good information. I'm showing you an enterprise tool. Instead of you just getting a bunch of generic certifications and stuff like that, I'm showing you really what's happening, because I'm trying to change people's mindset on what's being sent to the general public who want to get into cybersecurity versus what's happening inside cybersecurity on the job every day. So once again, and I do have a cybersecurity mentorship boot camp. It is I have a link in the description. It's not cheap, but it is effective, and you will learn this. You will go through this console. You will take action. You will learn these aspects of it, and not to mention vulnerability scanning, firewall administration. You will learn all of them in the boot camp. So if this is appealing to you, think about it. Just keep buying generic certifications, keep showing up and getting rejected, or come get some real training and real skill that you can use and walk in there with confidence. And I'm helping people to update their resumes in LinkedIn as they're part of the program in addition to that. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.